Yes, Star Wars Skeleton Crew episode
If
4.
anyone ever comes poking around looking for the treasure, he told me to pull
Hello,
them
my
apart.
pod.
Welcome back, everyone. It's Charlie. This will be my full Star Wars Skeleton Crew Episode 4 video. There are a whole bunch of Easter eggs and
There's a
references,
little
revealing a bunch more details about what happened to the
cliffhanger
different
and
9 jewels of the
twist
Old
to it.
Republic, like the 9 planets that exist in the formation with At-Aten. So we'll break it all down. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. There's a bunch of big stuff happening this week that I'll talk about at the end of the video. The episode title was Can't Say I Remember No At-Aten, which is a reference to SN33's reply each time the kids ask him how to get to At-Aten or if he remembers
Yeah, he was
At-Aten,
acting weird this
revealing
whole
at the end of the
episode though.
episode that his original captain actually forced him to remove all memory of At-Aten from his memory banks and then destroy the actual coordinates physically that were on one of the towers, and it's possible his original captain did the same thing on the other 8 planets so that all the coordinates to At-Aten have been destroyed in similar towers like this. So it winds up being one of those grammar jokes, like grammar is important, where you put the comma is important in a sentence. What he's really been saying is, I can't say that I remember no At-Aten, not that he doesn't know where it is. He definitely remembers, which Fern tries to use her trick of overriding the droid and what it does, with him also remembering At-Aten, and on top of that, remembering his captain's subsequent orders if someone did do this to him, like did reactivate his memory of At-Aten, that he would rip them apart. This is probably the order in which he did things. So the original captain killed the other crew members of his that saw the coordinates to At-Aten.
Yeah, he
then he
want nobody to
probably
know.
told SN33 that he was going to wipe his memory, and if anyone came along and tried to dig the coordinates out of his memory banks, then to pull them apart, then had him destroy the coordinates, then ordered him to forget anything related to At-Aten in what just happened. So really this became a trick of them asking SN33 the right series of questions in the right order. Now their big trick is trying to find a way to reactivate him when he doesn't pull them apart. Like, how do they fix his memory so that he doesn't pull them apart? Probably some really fast talking from Fern. And based on the episode, what they're also implying, next big reveal, is that all the 9 planets, the jewels of the Old Republic, were identical. Like all the same structures, the same houses, the same designs, everything was meant to be the same. Based on the 2 different factions that we see in the episode, it also seems like it's all the same races on each of the planets too. So they're almost saying that one of the great works of the Old Republic, like this great work they keep referring to, involved copies of different civilizations on each of the planets that were meant to be identical, like planned communities of the same groups of people. So it's almost like the actual great work is like just a huge social experiment. And at some point on this At-Akron planet, things devolved into civil war, and it tore the planet apart, and these different factions rose up in the generations after that. When Kim said that the other 8 planets were destroyed, this is probably what she was referring to, where like the societies devolved in different ways into like Lord of the Flies situations. That's kind of the vibe on At-Akron. They're kind of like a Lord of the Flies society now with different factions. The actual opening scene starts with the kids going back to At-Aten, but notices they're flying through the green nebulous gases that are similar in the orbit around At-Aten, around their home planet. We actually find out they arrive on At-Akron, one of the other planets. You can kind of tell what's going on when they pass by all these broken satellites in orbit meant to be similar to the satellites in their orbit, only on their home planet, their satellites are still working. This might have been part of the reason why the society on their planet devolved. Like either they erupted into civil war and that led to the destruction of their satellite system protecting the planet, or the other thing happened first, like the satellites were destroyed and something outside, some outside force caused them to devolve into civil war. The really important things during the episode that you probably detected is that because the planet's designs, like all the buildings, everything are meant to be identical, a lot of the things they discover, like the secrets, the hidden turrets, the supervisor's tower, is probably identical on their home planet At-Aten, and they'll be able to use that when they eventually go home. So imagine back on their home planet where their parents are just like living peacefully, trying to do what they're told to do. There's all these hidden weapons all over the place. And they just forgot about them because they've grown up for many, many generations not questioning it, and nobody's been talking about it. So there's no one that's still alive that remembers any of that stuff.
Either.
My early theory now, too, is that they'll pay this off by having Neil use the gun turret on the top of their school, which also will probably still work against the pirates when they eventually catch up looking for JUY. You have to remember that they're trying to get him, like they're off in the distance trying to tail them to At-Aten
eventually. I forgot all about them.
Bounty on his head. I want him groveling at my feet.
Maybe the next episode we'll see them.
There are a couple people and groups that they reference in the episode that haven't been featured in Star Wars before, so I think they created some backstory, some lore that they'll explain in further episodes. But when they arrive and Jude Law thinks that they're at Atten, he gets surprised and says, Renaud's ghost. That's not a character from Star Wars lore, so they might explain that he was some famous Jedi in the past, or maybe he was like a famous pirate at some
Yeah,
point.
probably a
There's
pirate,
more
like
jokes about him being
Baby Jones
subordinate to
Walker.
the kids, like, you're not allowed in
Almost.
the cockpit, no adults in the cockpit. We find out there's some weird autopilot system that's running on the planet that causes the ship to try and land somewhere, but SM-33 overrides it. That means that back on Atten, there's also probably a similar system controlling the ships that try to enter the planet. Remember, anything that they find working on this Akron planet probably has a version that's also working on their home planet of Atten. They land in the wreckage of a neighborhood that looks similar to their neighborhood. They go to a house that looks just like Fern's house, but it's all decrepit, like it looks like it was destroyed long ago. Jude Law says all the ash and dust reminds him of his home planet. The trick about that, though, is that it could describe pretty much any planet in Star Wars history. So we're
We
like
don't know.
slowly learning more about his character. We'll probably get some more flashbacks in the next couple of episodes. There are a couple funny moments with SM-33 treating him as if he's a young baby, like, come along, baby, don't make me use my strong voice. And like I said, when they're going through the copy of Fern's house, they're starting to realize that maybe this has something to do with the great work, like some grand social experiment with planned communities on 9 different planets. This is also probably to explain why there are suburbs on these different planets. Like, this is some grand experiment, and that's why you don't see suburbs all over the place in Star Wars
I'm
movies.
telling you, trying to
Wim
control
wonders
them.
if there's been a time jump and they just didn't realize, like they fell asleep, like
And
one of the
Adams
tales
is
of
the
his
last
Knights of
one
the
they
Old
got.
Republic stories, which could be a clue for other things in future episodes too. Like, there seems like there's a lot of clues that they're trying to plant in his Jedi stories. Back on the ship, there's a couple Easter eggs. Jude Law's ransacking, looking for useful tools and weapons. He finds a holo disc with a recording of the circus performance from the Star Wars Holiday Special, the same one that Neil's siblings were watching, meaning that Neil probably brought this when they came to the ship. Like, he brought along the circus, like he wanted to watch it again. I guess that'd be kind of like bringing your favorite movies if you're going on a trip. Like, I'll bring a couple movies to watch.
You didn't even
If
know
you
you were
haven't watched
going
the
on a
Star
trip,
Wars
though.
Holiday Special, it is a trip. Like, it is a journey for the fandom. But in that, they actually
Got
do
on
have this
Disney
weird
Plus.
looking circus that they just reused when they did Skeleton Crew. If you don't remember, George Lucas hated it so much that he tried to collect every copy and bar any TV networks or any studios from re-airing the Star Wars Holiday Special till relatively recent
Does look
history
pretty
when YouTube
bad.
was created and people just started re-uploading it to YouTube. So if George Lucas had his way, nobody would ever seen the Star Wars Holiday Special ever again.
Oh,
Harrison
now.
Ford actually tells really funny stories about how he tried to get his lawyer to find a way in his contract so that he wouldn't have to do it, but they couldn't find it, so he literally was forced to actually be in the holiday special. But then he finds Wim's sock full of Old Republic credits, which he winds up using later in the episode to save their lives. SM-33 attacks him thinking that he's a thief, and it's also meant to connect to the whole storyline where his original captain programmed him to kill anyone looking for Atten and the
Yeah, be
treasure.
careful
So it's
with
really
that
that just
droid.
kicking in his systems. But then he starts talking
You
about
crash out.
Akron, and Jude Law clocks that and figures out what's
It's
really
about
going
to
on. Like,
crash out
oh,
on the
it's in your
kids.
memory banks. We just need to find a way to actually pull that memory out of you somehow. He's the first person that realizes that SM-33 has been here before. The kids spot a statue of was probably one of the planet's founding members, and this is probably a big reveal too, which is why they didn't have the head. Like, they didn't want you to see what the face looked like, because it's probably going to be some familiar person from Star Wars history. They reveal Hana and then the Lord of the Flies situation with the 2 different tribes of people that have risen up. She calls her faction the Toik, and they're basically meant to be the survivors, like the further generations of the original inhabitants before the planet broke into civil war. The only thing in the episode is they never really explained what caused them to devolve into civil
I'm
war
sure they'll
to
get
lead to
to
this
it
situation in
eventually.
present day. She tells them about the Hatton, the rival faction, and I love the way that Wim responds
Maybe
to
a
this. Like, wait a minute,
spin-off.
are you fighting a group of adults for control of the planet? As if that would be his dream on his home planet to fight the adults for control. He's half right because there are adults on both sides, so technically there are kids fighting adults, but each group is just like 2 different factions of the planet. It's not just kids versus adults. This whole successive generations of like different factions rising up and then fighting each other in this never-ending cycle of war feels very Star Trek. Like, it feels like a Star Trek episode where the kids like Neil offer like the moral message, like, this is the cost of war. Things on my home
He's so
planet are
nice,
peaceful.
bro.
Like, we live a wonderful
So
existence.
innocent.
Things here could be so much better if you weren't always fighting each other. The harder thing to do wouldn't be to kill them in battle. It would be to actually make peace with them. implying that maybe someday, like in a hopeful sense, maybe this planet will also go back to normal. You notice when they hide from the Hatton, they actually jump into the wreckage of one of the buses, the same ones on At Atten that they just used to ride to
Mm,
school. When the enemy
they
patrol
really
comes by
got
too,
all the
they're in what
same
looks like
shit.
a similar design to the battle droid tanks from the Clone Wars. But remember, this is meant to be from way, way before, like this predates that whole era in the Star Wars timeline. So it's almost like the battle droid tanks were inspired by these older designs.
Mm,
And it kind of looks like the races that make up this group are similar to the races on their home planet of At Aden. That's why I say that each of the different 9 planets might have just
that's
had the
kind of
same
weird,
races
bro.
planted in the same exact
The
communities,
higher
the same
power
designs, and it was just a
trying to
grand social
control everything.
experiment. Like, let's test the effects of putting
One
all these
person,
different
probably.
people on these
The
different planets in the
supervisor
same
that they
setting
called
and
it.
see what happens to each of them. With terrible things happening to like 8 of the 9 planets. Maybe that's some sort of Star Trek level commentary on society, like people are always driven to try and kill each other ultimately. And the reason why At Atten is so weird is because they didn't do that. But the twist being,
Mm,
they're still peaceful because they've been living under the yoke of this very controlling fascistic type of society. You can almost think of that as sort of commentary on life inside the Empire versus the New Republic. Like, which is better, being controlled by an emperor and an empire where your personal freedoms basically don't exist, or total chaos, which sounds like the New Republic. Like, things in the Star Wars universe right now under the New Republic seem relatively chaotic. So, sort of like a free
mm-hmm.
will versus control situation. Hana takes them back to her base, which is inside the wreckage of the old school. Same copy, same looking school that they also go to on At Aden, same town center too, which is all complete wreckage. She mentions her whole reason for finding them was they were looking for stolen AOPs. Those are the animals that we've seen walking behind the Hatan patrol. They've actually shown up in Star Wars before. They call her father, the leader
Bruh,
of their
so they
group, General
basically sold
Strix.
them to the
There is a
enemy.
Strix
I
from
just
Star Wars
noticed that.
Legends. He was a major in the old Sith Empire, but that's not canon anymore. And the way they present him, he like just a random person that rose up on this planet, like one of the successive generations. At some point when he dies, Hana will grow up and become the leader of their group. He sounds like he has no idea about any At Aden, like in the successive generations, they've also forgotten about it, and they only trade with off-worlders, but don't actually travel off-world themselves. Maybe that will change at the end of the series when the kids sort of reveal all the different
Bruh,
secrets and what's been going
I
on
would have
At
traveled
Aden.
out of there.
They tease the
They had all
supervisor's
that
tower
going
on
on.
this planet is a fallen sanctum that has star maps and data about At Aden, which we find out about the end of the episode. And part of the joke here is that they plan to train the kids up and use them as cannon fodder in their raid to try and get the AOPs back. There are a couple of funny moments throughout this, like they use Neil's character to be sort of like the morality of the episode. He's the person that gives Hana the moral talking to, the moral lesson of the episode. But I love the way that when he decides he doesn't want to practice fighting, she yanks him by his trunk and just drags him outside. She
Freak.
reveals that secret massive gun turret on the roof of the school. Like I said, there's probably a copy of that on the kids' school back on At Aden. They might wind up using that when the
You're gonna
pirates
have
that are
to go
chasing
off on that
JUY show
gun.
up. That just feels like the only reason for
You gonna
Neil
blow
to
them
learn
up.
that this exists on the roof of the school. Like, oh, my school also has a secret gun turret? I should have used that in the future. They keep
Yeah, that's
asking why the
crazy, bro.
planet devolved into civil war here, but they never really answer the question. We found out that KB is a crack shot, also doesn't totally understand how high fives work. I think they're kind of
Mm,
coding her as being autistic. Maybe that has something to do with why she's wearing all that headgear
maybe.
Lobot style. Wim also having the time of his life, but just not quite ready for the larger guns.
Mm,
Then the big joke is when they force the kids, including Neil, to be cannon fodder, go out on the battlefield. They reveal that Jude Law got the
they're
AOPs
trying to
back
get
by
them
using
cooked.
his Old Republic credits and basically uses them to get the kids back. So essentially, he saved their lives, kind of winning them over slowly because they just got to the point where they didn't really trust him at all.
He
So
Loki
he's
turning into the
slowly
good
winning
guy
them
though.
over bit by bit. This is like the beginning of his slow redemption on the show. And when I say slow, I mean slow. Like he will probably do a couple underhanded things in the next couple
Yeah.
episodes. But this is an example of how he's still fundamentally good or wants to be good and will probably ultimately wind up saving the kids' lives again. They go to this planet's version of the Supervisor's Tower. Like I said, their Supervisor's Tower on At Aden, their home planet, will probably be the exact same. So everything they find out
So he's
about this
gonna
will
have
probably
the
come in handy
coordinate.
soon.
The
Neil tries
Adam
to get Hana
probably.
to come with them, but she doesn't
I
want to
mean, I
leave her
know it's
people.
an Adam,
Like I
but
said, they might pay that off at the end of the series
who
when they
knows?
start to open communications between the planets. Her giving him the kiss on the cheek might also give
Mm,
him some of the courage to talk to his crush back home. That was the big thing, like he was afraid to talk to his crush in the first episode.
Man,
At the
bump
top of the
her, bro.
supervisor's tower, they
You got
find an
the other
empty
one
room
now.
with pillars representing each of the 9 jewels of the Old Republic, the 9 planets,
You got a
first thing
fighter.
A2, each of them having coordinates. There's at Arissa, at Erevan, at Akoda. Then they find the destroyed coordinates on the one for at Aten, with the big SN-33 reveal and his former captain's orders. They haven't totally explained why his former captain was trying to hide the location of at Aden and kill the rest of his crew, but this is meant to be similar to the Treasure Island story, also
He
the
wanted
One-Eyed
it
Willie
all for
story from the
himself.
Goonies movie, where his original captain probably destroyed all knowledge or tried to destroy all knowledge of at Aden so that nobody else would have a chance of stealing the treasure for themselves. Like he was trying to protect the treasure for himself. Then I think they're implying that he's actually one of the dead people on the ship. He tried to kill one of
Yeah,
the other
more than
remaining crew
likely.
members and was killed during that fight. There might be some other big reveal about who his original captain was, but I think he's meant to be dead in present day. Like this is meant to be
Or they might
long,
find him
long
in the
ago
treasure
because that ship
place.
looked like it was buried under at Aten for a long time. But I think one of the funnier things here, though, is that when they go to the top of the tower, maybe some of you were expecting this, there's basically nothing there. And remember, the kid said, oh, nobody's allowed to go up inside the tower. Even the kid's parents aren't allowed to go up inside the tower. Probably because they would also find data on all the other planets. When they learn the truth, Fern has a meltdown. Wim gives her a little pep talk saying she was always the right person to be the captain, and he gives her the idea to ask the right series of
Bro, this show
questions
kind of
and
got
statements
potential, though,
to reactivate SN-33's memory,
for the future.
also causing his backup orders from his captain to Hulk out and kill everyone who came around asking about the treasure. Jude Law saves
Who's
the
trying
kids
to blow
and
his head
Neil,
off.
again, remember, this is like another strike in his favor, like another reason why they might start to slowly trust him. Using the off switch, causing Neil to faint, such a sweet summer child. Poor Neil was not meant for times of war. And at the beginning of next week's episode, the big trick is fixing SN-33's programming so that they can reactivate him without him trying to kill them on the spot, so they can use his memory banks to slowly get
It
back to
can't be
at
too
Aten.
far from home,
But
though.
what they might have to do, early theory, is they might have to go to one of the other 9 planets and use something that they might find there to get back to at Aten, because I don't think we
That's
actually
if
get
they
back to
didn't
at Aten till
do
like
the same
episode
thing
6
to the other
maybe.
planets.
So episode 5 might be them just going to one of the other 9 different planets. We will see what they find on
Possibly.
that planet too, but I wouldn't be surprised if the situation on that planet isn't too different from what happened on this planet.
Or the
They kind of
pirates
make
are
it
gonna
sound like
catch up.
SN-33's original captain, though, visited all the different 9 planets. But there's a bunch of Easter eggs and references, a couple big reveals during the episode. If there's anything that you spotted that I didn't talk about during the video, write it below in the comments. My full episode 5 video will post next week after they release it, and there's a bunch of big stuff happening this week too. We're going to get that full Superman trailer in a couple days. Be sure to enable alerts for my channel so you don't miss that. We're getting a bunch of Superman and just...
That's it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like it.